Hi, this is Warren Redlick with West Boca News, and we're doing our first podcast ever. I got particularly motivated by a traffic accident that happened yesterday with a fatality, and so I decided I wanted to talk about it, and I called my friend Andrew McClary. Andrew is a longtime resident of West Boca, lives not far from me at the west end of Palmetto Park Road, and there's some intersections that bother me in West Boca. And, we have some near us on the west end of Palmetto Park Road. This accident that just happened is on Southwest 18th Street, or was on Southwest 18th Street at Country Park, just west of the Turnpike. And so I wanted to talk about that more. Andrew, I'm going to let Andrew tell you a little bit about himself before we get into what we're talking about.
Well, I do a number of things. I have a company called McClary Design and Engineering, but I also run car show television. But in a little bit previous, not really a previous life, but earlier in my career, I spent quite a bit of time doing accident recreations, and I would investigate accidents and then recreate them in 3D animation for litigation purposes. So I've got a little bit of knowledge of how a lot of this works, and some of the problems that I have seen in my career that occur in accidents similar to this.
So what motivates me, this is Warren again, and I'm a car accident lawyer. I do a lot of other things. I do criminal defense and I do real estate, but one of the things I've done a lot of for the last 20 plus years is I've done car accident cases. I worked for Allstate. I defended people who were being sued in car accident cases. After I left Allstate, I worked for a judge and oversaw cases that involved car accidents, and then I started my own law firm, and I represent people who've been injured in car accidents, and now I sue people and sue insurance companies. So I've seen a lot of ends of it. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is there's a type of intersection called a roundabout. And a roundabout is an intersection, or some people call it a traffic circle. Roundabout is a type of intersection that some people hate for some reason, but they are known for being safer. They are actually known for having higher throughput, getting more cars through the intersection. They actually are more efficient. There's a great episode of the TV show Mythbusters that talks about roundabouts. But anyway, with that in mind, I wanted to talk about the accident that just happened. I'm more familiar with it than Andrew, I think, so let me go through it. The Sheriff's Department issued a report last night. A gentleman was driving an AT&T van coming out of Country Park, coming northbound, approaching Southwest 18th Street. Southwest 18th Street at that location has a 40 or 45 mile an hour speed limit. He had a stop sign. There's a car coming from his left going eastbound, and apparently he didn't see it. And we don't know exactly what happened. Maybe the car was driving fast, but even if the car is driving fast, the car on the through street has right-of-way. If you have a stop sign, you're supposed to yield to oncoming traffic, even if they're speeding. We don't know if he was speeding or not. There are some reports that say he was. But he comes out and he gets hit, as far as we understand, he gets hit in the driver's door with by a vehicle going perhaps 40, 50 miles an hour, and he was killed. And the other driver was injured, taken to the hospital, appears to be okay. A young driver. The thing that motivates me is that this kind of accident can't happen in a roundabout. A roundabout forces vehicles to slow down. It changes accidents so they don't happen. This is known as a T-bone collision, where the front of the one car hits the side of the other car, making a T. And if the driver of the second car is where the front of the other car is coming in, it tends to be a very dangerous collision with strong potential for serious injury. There was an accident last year, a young kid had stolen a car and T-boned into another car, killing the driver. T-bone collisions can be very dangerous. And roundabouts reduce the risk of that. They change the angles of the accidents and they slow the vehicles down. People find them annoying initially, but they're better. And I think we could have a series of roundabouts going down Southwest 18th, going down Palmetto Park Road, going down Glades Road, primarily west of 441, but in other places as well. Wherever you have an intersection that doesn't have a traffic light, roundabouts are better than nothing. And when you do have a traffic light, often roundabouts are still better, because if somebody runs a red light, then you have a very serious collision, which doesn't happen in a roundabout. So that's my take on what I see in West Boca, one of the things that could really make our lives better. Andrew, what do you think about roundabouts?
Well,
I don't know if I didn't ask him before. I don't know if he agrees with me.
I think roundabouts in the right location can be very good. My parents actually live in Carmel, Indiana, which I grew up in that area, and since then they have put roundabouts all over. In fact, it's kind of a strange city because it's now known for having its roundabouts because they've got so many of them. In other words, those roundabouts came about after I left. I haven't lived there for over 25 years, but when I go back there now, there's roundabouts everywhere. And at first when I saw them, I was like, okay, this is crazy. But after I've driven around a little bit in my parents' neighborhood, I find out that they actually work quite well. They do keep traffic moving. Particularly, the funny part is in rush hour, which you would think that, oh man, these would slow everything down. The reality is they kind of keep the traffic moving even in rush hour because everybody kind of goes into the roundabout and they go their direction and nobody ever has to actually stop, which is kind of the key to the roundabouts. But here, before I talk about roundabouts though, let me talk about one problem I see with a lot of streets in Florida. And this is something that's very indicative, particularly of South Florida. And that is, and this is also, it's the same way in Southwest 18th Street, it's the same way in Palmetto, and it's the same way in Glades. And this is that we have a tendency to put we have these rather wide streets that have 2 lanes going both directions, and then to make it even wider, we put a center median in the middle that we put palm trees in, which looks great, works great. But the problem that you have with this is when you have an intersection that does not have a light and that has a smaller residential street coming out to it, you end up with a really wide intersection. And there's a lot of area there. And this is the case in this one. You actually, because they also had a turn lane there, a left-hand turn lane on 18th Street, the person on County Park Drive actually has to cross 3 lanes of traffic before they make their turn.
I think there's a right turn lane into County Park, and there may be a 3rd lane on the other side as well.
Well, I'm actually looking at I'm looking at it.
Maybe there's 4 lanes
on Google here on Google Satellite, and from where he was turning, he would have had to cross 3 lanes of traffic. And the problem is when you're going from stop and then having to cross 3 lanes of traffic, it actually takes quite a bit of time to move out and move through that intersection to make your turn.
Yeah. And
when you've got an area where you guys going from a complete stop and he's crossing traffic that can be going 45, and sometimes, I mean, you know, people go fast, be going 65 miles an hour along there. They're not supposed to, but it's a 4-lane
we know road, we know what happens.
And it happens. So, you know, I mean, I live out here in at the end of West Palmetto, and we've got at least 2 of these intersections out here, and I've seen numerous accidents at them. Again, it's that where you've got a really wide, big intersection, and you know, theoretically the car could pull out into kind of the middle and wait and then turn, but it rarely ever happens. Usually people are in a hurry. It's in their neighborhood. It's, you know, it's their area, so they're accustomed to it and they think that they know what's going on. And in this case, most likely the gentleman was probably coming out. He looked to his left. He may or may not have seen the vehicle. He may have thought that he had the time to make the turn, but again, you're crossing 3 lanes of traffic, and you know, you really don't know necessarily what the speed is, and an accident can happen. I've seen so many accidents occurring down here at the end of Palmetto, and this is not a high traffic area.
Yeah, if I can just clarify, we both live near the near where Boca Winds and Boca Falls are at the west end of Palmetto Park Road. So one area where we see a lot of accidents is Boca Falls has a big entrance on Palmetto Park Road,
yes.
And across from it is one of the main entrances to Boca Winds, and it's just like Andrew's describing. There's 2 lanes each way. I believe there's a left turn lane.
I mean, it's big enough that you could probably
I don't think there's a left turn lane, but
it's a big enough
no,
area.
There is a left turn lane.
If
you're coming westbound on Palmetto Park Road,
there's a right turn lane.
There's a right turn lane and a left turn lane. So now it's 4 lanes you got to cross to get to the median.
It's big enough you could put a basketball court in the middle of it.
It's an awful lot of room. And another spot where I've seen a lot of accidents is the intersection at Island Lakes on Glades Road, which I think is across from Judge Winnick Cough. It might be across from Ponderosa. I get confused between those two. But Island Lakes is the neighborhood. I've seen a lot of accidents at that intersection, and it's the same thing where there's 2 lanes going one way. There may be a right turn lane or a left turn lane, making the road even wider. And again, to me, a solution to this problem is putting in a roundabout. Yeah. But you know, what Andrew's describing, you know, he's nailing it. You're creating these large intersections, and even if there's and maybe because there's low volumes of traffic, relatively speaking, maybe people think they're safer.
I think they let their guard down a lot.
People let their guard down because they're comfortable with it. They know the intersection. And the first one I remember was at Island Lakes. There was a guy on a motorcycle. He survived. And I believe he was coming westbound on Palmetto Park, on Glades Road, passing Island Lakes, and a BMW came out. And I think he drove right into the driver's door and flew over the car, and he was in the roadway, and he survived. He had serious injuries, but he survived. And he's probably we don't know. Most likely he was going faster than he should have. Motorcycles are a particular problem because drivers often don't see them. But anyway,
well, one of the things you talked about the roundabouts, and it's interesting. I think FedEx might have been the one that they basically told their drivers they only wanted them to make right-hand turns.
Yeah.
And because most of these fatal accidents usually occur, at least in my experience, most of the fatal accidents I've been involved in, it's usually occurring when somebody's turning left. It rarely happens when the person's turning right, because when a car's turning right, even if the car hits it, they're hitting it at such an angle that the energy is dissipated more in one direction, and they usually don't end up as fatalities. And that's one of the things with a traffic circle is everybody is always turning to the right. So
we actually had a significant collision on Palmetto Park Road at the Boca Falls Boca Winds entrance. It was the Boca Winds side. There was a car coming out of Boca Winds making a right turn, and there was a car, a group of students, I think, coming eastbound on Palmetto Park Road. And if I understand what happened correctly, the car coming out of Boca Winds should not have come out. I don't think the kids were necessarily going that fast, but they rolled.
Yeah.
And they survived, and the other driver survived because the relative velocities are a little bit better, and the angle of collision's a little bit better, so that reduces the risk. It's not just FedEx. I've heard that for a long time, that you shouldn't make left turns. That intersection should be just it just made me think of another intersection. If you're going on Palmetto Park Road and you're on the west side of the Florida Turnpike, there's a spot where from Boca Rio that you can come in to Palmetto Park Road, and then just west of that, there's an apartment complex that's on the north side of Palmetto Park Road, and those people can make a left turn onto Palmetto Park Road. So now you've got 3 lanes, plus a turn lane, plus a left turn lane, a right turn lane and a left turn lane. You've got to cross 5 lanes of traffic to make a left turn onto Palmetto Park Road, where the speed limit is 50 miles an hour, and there's people going 65, 70 miles an hour. And I can't believe that we allow that the system we have allows people to make left turns at that point.
Well, the funny thing is that at least in these intersections that are out here by the Boca Winds and Boca Falls area, to make them into roundabouts would be very easy. By the way, the roundabouts also, you get a place now where you can, at least up in Carmel, Indiana, where I was up there, they made all the roundabouts very nice. So you've got almost like a little park on the inside, and then in the circle of each one of them where they've done some kind of something creative landscape-wise, and it really has made the area very beautiful. So particularly out here in our area, it's a beautiful area. I think that not only would it help the traffic, but it also beautify the area, as opposed to having just a big intersection there. Right now, it's just a big asphalt intersection. And if you go out there and look, the vast majority of the asphalt isn't even used because it's just a big area.
Yeah. No. One of the things I wanted to mention that stands out in my mind is when I talk about roundabouts, I get excited about roundabouts. I can't stop getting excited about roundabouts. I always think we should be doing roundabouts. And people have this attitude, well, roundabouts wouldn't work. When I mention this, one of the best lines I get is, drivers in Boca couldn't handle roundabouts. Like, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but they don't handle regular intersections well anyway. But I think, we do have roundabouts. And especially West Boca, if you're driving north on Kane Boulevard and you cross Yamato and you're going towards Clintmore, it doesn't quite reach Clintmore, it goes to Boca Chase, Lakes of Boca Raton, Boca Chase. there's a roundabout in there. And it's an old style roundabout. It's not a modern roundabout, but it works. I've never seen an accident there. It's certainly never been reported to be a serious accident there, because that's the way roundabouts are. And then if you're in East Boca, you go to the end of Clintmore Road. You cross over I-95 and you turn left on Northwest 2nd Avenue. There are roundabouts going north there. We do have some experience with roundabouts in Boca Raton and West Boca, and roundabouts have been around for a long time. They're very common in Europe. They're just safer. They actually are more efficient. They get more cars through. They're safer. It's very hard. And what happens is, one of my frustrations is, when I suggest roundabouts, people flip out. Oh, we don't need roundabouts. We don't want roundabouts. We don't like roundabouts. And that has an effect on politicians. We have politicians who could do something about this and implement roundabouts and make our roads safer. And people will say, well, we should just put in a traffic light. If you put in a traffic light, that's not necessarily safer, because you have that moment where somebody blows the light and you still have the high-speed collision. The advantage of roundabouts is they reduce the high-speed collisions. The other problem, and I think you've seen... Go ahead.
I think one of the things that people... I'm not sure why people don't like them, but... putting in a stoplight, to me, is not a good solution, because when you put in a stoplight, you're now stopping traffic. You're typically stopping traffic a lot of times when maybe there's not that much traffic at all. Out here in West Boca, there are times when there's like no traffic at all. Well, I don't want to be stopped at a stoplight when there's no traffic at all. But with a roundabout, you just slow down, you turn to the right into the circle, you go around, and you continue to keep going. I go back to my experience up in Carmel, Indiana. They kind of gone crazy with them. So you might actually Google Carmel, Indiana and roundabouts, and you can read about some of them. But the thing is a lot of the reason why I can bring it back to this is because I remember when they weren't there, driving there as a kid, and now going back as an adult and visiting my parents, and there's roundabouts everywhere. It is so much easier to get from point A to point B with those roundabouts than when they weren't there. And the thing is that, to me, I find it frustrating when I have to stop my car. Well, with a roundabout, you rarely ever stop your car. You just slow down, you merge into the roundabout, and you keep going. And even in rush hour traffic up in Carmel, I'm able to kind of keep going from point A to point B, and you just slow down into the roundabout and you keep moving.
All right. So we're up. This was an experiment. This is the first podcast for West Boca News. We're approaching 18 minutes, and I was shooting for 15. So I'm going to wrap this up. I want to thank Andrew McClary. What's your company again?
It's McClary Design and Engineering at McClaryDesign.com.
And there's also Car Show TV. Andrew and our friend Alex Berry have made a ton of videos at car shows.
Yep, we're big car fans.
Did you guys ever go to Packy's?
Oh yeah, we were at Packy's. I was actually at Packy's this last weekend, and
for Car Show TV, I mean.
No, not really. We have covered it with Car Show TV a couple years ago, but I show up there regularly, and we'll cover it on our Facebook page, and there's a lot of guys there that I know, so it's always fun to show up to.
Yeah, if you like cars, I would suggest following Car Show TV. If you need any kind of engineering work, Andrew does some really cool. He has a lot of equipment. His garage is like a factory, and he can make all kind of cool things. He's somewhat famous for a device for speed loading rifles. What is it called?
It's the Thunderstruck loader. It's a speed loader for AR-15s that we manufacture. But my company, primarily what we do a lot of is prototyping of products. So if you've got something that you're looking to, a part that you're looking to produce an idea, we can make prototypes of that for you.
But it's almost like everything. I mean, I remember, wasn't there something with your mailboxes in your neighborhood that they wanted to do something with the mailboxes, and you set up something to make parts for mailboxes for people?
Well, I was in fact, I could cut all the letters for the mailboxes, and was just redoing mailboxes for a while. I was also making a number of parts for repairing mailboxes. So when these cast iron, or actually cast aluminum braces on the mailboxes would break, and people would give me a call, and I could use some of my special parts and we would repair it.
And one last thing, you're a Star Wars nut.
Yeah.
And you have some kind of R2-D2 thing. Can you explain the R2-D2 thing?
Well, my son contracted cancer a couple of years ago, and looking for something to kind of bond with him, and we've always been big Star Wars fans here. I'm a much larger Star Wars fan than he was, but he wasn't going to be in school, and so since we had to take him out of school and he was going to be going through chemo and everything else, he and I had decided that we would build a full-size R2-D2 as a father and son project, and kind of use it as a learning tool for learning some different robotics. As it turned out, unfortunately, my son, the chemo got to him very rapidly, and he was in no condition to be helping me with the R2-D2, and he kind of lost interest in it, which was understandable considering the condition. So I continued building it at night when I would come home from the hospitals, and then once I finished it, I was taking it to the hospital with me to entertain the other kids that are there in the oncology wing. And R2 has participated in a couple of Make-A-Wish projects, and he'll be going up to Star Wars Celebration on Wednesday and be on display up there at that event. He's basically there to bring joy to kids. My son, by the way, is actually still down in the hospital down in Miami with bone marrow transplant, and he's recovering from that. And we hope that we're very confident that he'll pull through on that. But we still got another 6 to 8 months of going through this fight.
Andrew's been through a lot, and his family's been through a lot. There's a GoFundMe, and we'll post a link to that along with this podcast. So thank you, Andrew, very much for doing this with me, and we'll see how this does. Never done a podcast before. We'll see how it does.
Well, good luck.
Thanks very much, everyone.